Chapter 5, the Integumentary System. We'll be talking about the skin and its accessory structures. So hair, oil, sweat glands, nails, and the sensory receptors. The function here is going to be to help the body maintain its temperature, convert inactive vitamin D to its active form, provide sensory information, help to guard the body's physical and biochemical integrity, and also to help the body to maintain the homeostasis in a number of ways. Dermatology is going to be the medical specialty that deals with diagnosing and treating skin disorders. You have a brief animation here that goes over the integumentary system. Here is your focus on homeostasis and how you are able to interact with all of the other systems in the body. With our thermoregulation, homeostatic control by allowing sweat to exit at the surface and adjust the blood flow in the dermis. The cutaneous sensations that will allow the nervous system to send the signals of touch, pressure, vibration, tickle, and pain. And then your skin is going to help you eliminate waste from the body and then synthesize vitamin D as well. So the skin has two main layers, the epidermis and the dermis. The most superficial portion is the epidermis. It is the epithelial layer. So we just learned all about the epithelial tissue makeup. And then the dermis is going to be the connective tissue. It is the deep layer. So epidermis starts with E. It is on the exit side or the outside. It is the actual skin that is exposed to the air, whereas the dermis, it begins with D and it is deep. Below the dermis, you have what we call the hypodermis or the subcutaneous layer. This actually is not a true layer of skin. It is areolar and adipose tissue, but it is not technically skin. This is going to serve as the fat storage, an area for your blood vessels to course through, and an area of pressure nerve endings. So here you'll just see that breakdown of the epidermis and the dermis, and then of course the subcutaneous layer. Same thing, you just have a microscopic view. Now, our epidermis is going to be made up of keratinized, stratified, squamous epithelium. So you learn what that meant, meaning the cells are keratinized, meaning that they contain the protein keratin, stratified, meaning that they have more than one layer of cells, and squamous, meaning that that top layer is going to be a flat like. And so these keratinized, stratified, squamous epithelium is going to have four main types of cells. We'll go into those cell types on the next slide, but also know that you can have two different types of skin, either thin skin or thick skin. Thin skin is going to contain hair, whereas thick skin won't contain hair. The thin skin is going to be primarily most of your body, except for your palms, the digits, and the soles. So those four main types of cells: keratinocytes, melanocytes, Langerhans cells, and Merkel cells. The keratinocytes produce the protein keratin. That's going to help to protect your skin and the underlying tissues from the heat, microbes, chemicals, the lamellar granules, which release a waterproof sealant. So the keratin is going to be the protection layer. Then the melanocytes are going to produce a pigment known as melanin, and that is going to help contribute to skin color as well as help to absorb UV light. The Langerhans cells, which are an intraepidermal macrophage, so a specialized type of macrophage or macrophage that lives in one place, they'll participate in our immune responses. And then finally, the Merkel cells or the tactile epithelial cells, those are going to be sensory and help with the sensation of touch. Your epidermis is going to have either 4 or 5 layers depending on if it is thin or thick skin. And so that thin or thick skin is, we said, is the thick skin is around the palms and the soles, and that's because of the degree of friction and mechanical pressure that you actually experience in those areas. So from deepest to most superficial, the layers here are, excuse me, the stratum basale, or also known as the stratum germinative, the stratum spinosum, the stratum granulosum, stratum lucidum, and then the stratum corneum. The stratum basale is going to be the deepest layer of the epidermis, and it actually contains some stem cells that are capable of undergoing cell division to form new cells. So that's why it's sometimes called the stratum germinative, because it is going to actually germinate or create new cells. This is where you'll find keratinocytes in this layer, the stratum basale. And when the germinal portion of the epidermis here is destroyed, we cannot regenerate or create new skin with a skin graft. So a skin graft is anything that you would have if you need to create a transfer of healthy skin from a donor site to cover a wound. So say a portion of the skin ends up with a large wound, and that skin's not going to be able to actually oppose back together on its own because the wound is too large, then you can have a skin graft performed. Now say if maybe a burn victim has a large portion of the skin removed, then maybe they don't have enough skin to be grafted to even cover the wound. Then we can they can do a graft that actually grows in the lab for a while until it gets larger, or there are some now man-made things that can be used as grafts as well. So a skin graft, if this layer of the skin or the epidermis has been damaged, then a skin graft cannot be used to help the skin regenerate. The stratum spinosum is going to help to provide the strength and flexibility to our skin, whereas the stratum granulosum will mark the transition here where we go from the deeper, more metabolically active portion and move into the more superficial or the dead cells of the skin or the epidermis. This layer here shows the formation of a water repellent sealant between the cells. So that water repellent sealant is provided by the keratinocytes that are going to be undergoing apoptosis. The stratum lucidum, it is only going to be present in our thick skin. So it'll be in the fingers, palms, and soles. And then finally the stratum corneum, it's going to be the most superficial layer, and it actually is going to contain dead cells. So you know that doing exfoliation to your skin can be good because it helps to remove those dead cells if they haven't fallen off on their own. So this superficial layer here is the stratum corneum. So that's what's being removed through exfoliation, or when the dead cells fall off or just flake off, such as would be dandruff. In the stratum corneum here, you have these lamellar granules, and that makes this water repellent. So because we're constantly exposed to friction, we can have this layer actually get thicker or increase in depth. And so that increase in depth of the layer is then what we call a callus, or an abnormal thickening of the epidermis. Psoriasis here is a chronic skin disorder and where you have more rapid division and movement of the keratinocytes that are in the epidermal strata. So because you have more rapid division and movement of them, you get that chronic skin disorder. And here is just a table that goes over there, the specifics. All right, we can compare and contrast the thin and the thick skin by where they are in the body, actual size, as well as the layers present. And then we'll talk about these epidermal ridges here shortly. The epidermal ridges, that's what actually gives you the fingerprints. And so on the palms in your thick skin, you get those epidermal ridges because of the dermal layers below, or the rows below. Now, the dermis itself, so the region that is now deep to the epidermis. The dermis is going to be composed of connective tissue with collagen and elastic fibers. It has two regions, a papillary layer and a reticular layer. The papillary layer is made up of areolar connective tissue with fine elastic fibers, dermal papillae, Meissner's corpuscles or corpuscles of touch, which help with sensation, some free nerve endings that are going to be there for sensations of heat, cold, pain, tickle, and itch. Then the reticular layer is going to be deeper than the papillary layer, and it's going to have dense irregular connective tissue with bundles of collagen and some elastic fibers. So this is where we get those, and then in between these spaces here in the reticular layer, that's where we'll find our adipose cells, our hair follicles, the sebaceous and the sudoriferous glands, which we'll talk about when we talk about the accessory structures. The collagen and the elastic fibers that are there provide the strength and the extensibility, so that's the actual ability to stretch, whereas it also provides some elasticity, that's the ability to return after it has stretched. And then we have the epidermal ridges that will increase the friction. They're on our fingertips. They help us grasp things better, and they give you fingerprints and footprints. These ridges will typically reflect the contours of the dermis. Stretch marks are going to result when you get some internal scarring because the skin has been stretched too much. And then tension lines and surgery. So we prefer to make surgical incisions along the lines of cleavage. And when you make them there, you can actually reduce some of the scarring. As far as the pigments of skin go, we have melanin, hemoglobin, and keratin. So these three pigments can give you a wide variety of colors. So melanin is going to be synthesized from melanocytes that are in your stratum basale. And once this melanin is synthesized, it will then cause the skin's color to vary from either a pale yellow to a reddish brown to black. And then we have pheomelanin, which causes the yellow to red skin tones. And then we have eumelanin, the brown to black. So you may have, if you wear makeup, you may have heard of like the red undertones versus the more neutral undertones, and so these are these melanin. Hemoglobin is going to be the red pigment that we find in our red blood cells. So when the skin becomes very flush, maybe a little embarrassment or something, the red blood cells will all rush to the skin, and then you get that flush red looking color. And then finally, keratin is a yellow-orange pigment. It's stored in the stratum corneum and in our adipose tissue as well. We have freckles that are basically when the melanin actually accumulates together. Those freckles will be seen as little patches of melanin. Clinical connection here with the skin pigments and colors. Albinism is going to be an inherent inability of an individual to actually produce melanin. So they are not able to produce the melanin. Whereas vitiligo is going to be complete or partial loss of the actual melanocytes, so the cells from the patches of skin that will result in irregular white spots. And then also cyanosis, jaundice, and erythema. These are things that can help us or give us clues, as they are sometimes signs to what may be going on internally. So cyanosis is a bluing of the skin. So if you don't have adequate oxygenation, then your skin may begin to turn blue. And jaundice would be if you have any kind of liver abnormalities or bile abnormalities build up in the body, then you'll turn yellow or jaundice. And then erythema is that reddening of the skin. So all of these you can see either at the skin, or you can especially also see at the mucous membranes. So we'll pause here and we'll move on to the next part of the lecture in the subsequent video.